It was another warm evening in the small town of Silver Creek. The sun had set and the air was cool, with a slight breeze that stirred the leaves of the nearby trees. The local saloon, the only one in town, was filled with the usual crowd of ranchers, farmers, and cowboys, all gathered to unwind after a long day's work. Among them was Caleb Cooper, a rancher in his early 30s who had lived a quiet life. He was known for his hard work and steady nature, always taking care of his cattle and land. Caleb was a man of few words, preferring the peaceful solitude of his ranch to the noise and chaos of the town. That night the saloon was especially lively. The men had gathered around a large wooden table, their faces red from laughter and too many drinks. The conversation was loud, filled with jokes and stories of cattle drives, wild horses, and local gossip. But Caleb sat apart from the others, nursing a drink quietly, lost in his thoughts. He never enjoyed the rough humor or the teasing that usually filled the air. Instead, he was content to watch the others, letting their boisterous laughter wash over him like a distant storm. The sheriff's daughter, Emily Hayes, was the topic of conversation tonight. Emily had once been a vibrant young woman, known for her beauty and spirit. But a few years ago, a tragic accident had left her paralyzed from the waist down, forever changing her life. Now she was mostly seen as a figure of pity in the town. People whispered about her accident, and the sympathy for her was always there, even if it was often laced with awkwardness. It was clear that Emily had become a symbol of what could have been, and many felt sorry for her, including the ranchers at the table. One of the men, a big rough rancher named Hank, leaned back in his chair and chuckled. He had never been one for subtlety, and his words carried the weight of an old unkind joke. "You know, Caleb," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I bet you couldn't handle the sheriff's daughter. She's trouble, that one. You wouldn't know what to do with her. I mean, a woman like that needs someone with a lot more patience and charm than a simple rancher." The others laughed, their voices filled with teasing, as if it were a harmless joke. But Caleb didn't laugh. He didn't respond right away either. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink and stared at the table. His hand tightened around the glass, but his face remained calm. He knew the men didn't mean any harm, but he hated the way they spoke about Emily, as if she were nothing more than a burden or an obstacle. Another rancher, Luke, joined in with a grin. "I'd say Caleb's got more than enough charm, but I don't think he could handle a woman like that. She's tough, and she's used to being coddled, not treated like like she's actually capable of doing anything on her own." The men laughed again, their voices ringing out through the saloon. Caleb felt his cheeks burn, but he didn't let it show. He wasn't one to get angry over a joke, even if it was at the expense of someone else. But something about the way they talked about Emily, the way they dismissed her, struck a nerve. He had seen her in town, seen the way people looked at her as if she were broken, as if she had nothing left to give. It wasn't fair and it wasn't right. Caleb stood up from his chair slowly, his movements deliberate. He walked over to the group of men who had momentarily quieted down, sensing something had changed. "I'll take that bet," he said, his voice steady and calm. The group fell silent, unsure if they had heard him correctly. Hank raised an eyebrow. "What? You're saying you'd take Emily Hayes on like that?" He waved his hand as if the idea were absurd. "I'll do it," Caleb repeated. "I'll take care of her for a week. I'll show you all that she's more than just some poor broken girl. I'll help her with whatever she needs." "I don't think it's as hard as you make it sound." The men exchanged glances. It was clear they hadn't expected Caleb to agree. They had thought it would be a joke, a way to get some laughter out of him, but Caleb wasn't laughing. He wasn't even smiling. There was something serious in his eyes, something that made the men hesitate. After a few long moments, Hank finally nodded, his grin returning. "Well, if you're so sure of it, Caleb, you've got yourself a deal. But don't say I didn't warn you." The others laughed again, but this time there was no malice in it. They were just entertained by the thought of Caleb, the quiet rancher, taking on a challenge that seemed impossible. Caleb didn't respond. He turned and walked out of the saloon without another word, the door swinging shut behind him. As he stepped into the cool night air, he felt the weight of his decision settle in. It wasn't about proving the men wrong or winning a bet. It was about showing respect. He knew Emily had been through a lot, and he knew that people often saw her only for her disability. But he also knew she was more than that, much more. The next morning, Caleb made his way to the sheriff's house. He had never spoken to Emily much before, but he had seen her from a distance. She often sat by the window, looking out at the world beyond as if she longed for something she couldn't have. Caleb didn't know if she would welcome his help, but he was determined to give it a try. He knocked on the door, his heart beating a little faster than usual. When Emily's father, Sheriff Hayes, answered, Caleb greeted him respectfully. "I've come to offer my help," he said, his voice steady. "I made a deal with some of the men at the saloon. They think I can't handle your daughter, but I believe I can help her. I'll be here for a week to assist with whatever she needs." Sheriff Hayes studied him for a long moment, his stern eyes assessing Caleb. Finally, he nodded. "If you're serious about this, you're welcome to try. Emily's used to being alone most of the time. She may not be easy to help, but if you think you can, then I won't stop you." Caleb stepped inside, his mind already turning to how he could approach Emily. He knew this would be harder than anything he had done before, but he was ready. There was something about this woman, this challenge, that made him feel as though he had a purpose. As he walked into the room where Emily sat, he saw her face for the first time up close. She looked at him with curiosity, her eyes sharp and questioning. But there was no pity in her gaze, only a quiet strength. Caleb smiled gently and nodded toward her chair. "Shall we begin?" he asked. Emily didn't say anything, but she gave him a slight nod. It was the beginning of a journey that neither of them could have predicted, one that would change them both in ways they never imagined. The morning sun shone brightly over Silver Creek, casting its warm glow over the town as Caleb made his way to the sheriff's house. His boots clicked softly on the dirt path as he approached the front door. He had spent the night thinking about the challenge ahead, but now that it was time to actually step into the sheriff's house and meet Emily, a feeling of nervousness settled in his chest. He had never dealt with someone in a wheelchair before, and he had no idea what to expect. But there was something inside him that told him this was the right thing to do. As he knocked on the door, his mind raced. He wasn't sure how Emily would react to his arrival. Would she be angry at the bet? Would she be resentful of his help? Caleb didn't know, but he hoped she would see that he wasn't there to pity her. He was just there to offer his assistance, nothing more. The door creaked open, and Caleb was greeted by the stern face of Sheriff Hayes. The sheriff looked at him for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he sized up Caleb. "You came," the sheriff said, his voice deep and steady. "I did," Caleb replied, offering a respectful nod. "I made a promise to help Emily for the week. I'll be here as long as she needs me." Sheriff Hayes didn't smile, but his gaze softened slightly. "Emily's been through a lot. She's not used to anyone offering help, especially not like this. But if you're serious, come in." Caleb stepped inside, feeling the weight of the sheriff's words. He could sense that the sheriff wasn't sure what to make of him, but he also knew the sheriff wouldn't stop him if he was genuinely trying to help. The interior of the house was simple but cozy, with wooden furniture and the smell of fresh bread coming from the kitchen. Caleb's eyes quickly scanned the room until they landed on Emily. She was sitting near the window, her wheelchair positioned so that she could look outside at the peaceful surroundings. She had always been a striking figure, even now, with her blonde hair tied back neatly and her face framed by soft features. But there was a sadness in her eyes, a sadness that Caleb had noticed before but never fully understood. She was staring out at the world, but her connection to it seemed distant. "Emily," Sheriff Hayes said, his voice softer than usual. "This is Caleb Cooper. He's here to help you with, well, everything." Emily turned her head slowly, her eyes meeting Caleb's for the first time. She didn't say anything immediately, just studying him with an intensity that made Caleb feel a little uneasy. There was no warmth in her gaze, no welcoming smile. Instead, it was a look of someone who had seen too many people come and go, all offering help that they didn't truly understand. Caleb cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. "I know this probably isn't what you were expecting," he began, "but I'm here to help in any way I can. I don't mean to step on anyone's toes, and I'm not here to pity you. I just think you're capable of more than people give you credit for." Emily's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't look angry. She seemed more curious, like she was trying to figure him out. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "You think you can do what others can't?" she asked, her voice low but strong. "You think you can help me just because you made a bet with some ranchers?" Caleb didn't flinch. He had expected her to challenge him, to push back. "No, I don't think I can do what others can't," he said calmly. "But I think that you're more than what others see. I don't know everything you've been through, but I know that you're not helpless. I want to help you find your own strength if you'll let me." Emily looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed and wheeled herself back a little, turning her body to face him fully. "All right then," she said, her voice still skeptical but no longer dismissive. "Let's see if you can actually help." Caleb nodded, relieved that she hadn't rejected him outright. He took a few steps closer, trying to appear as calm and steady as possible. He didn't want to overstep, but he didn't want to stand there awkwardly either. He looked around, noticing a pile of books on the table beside her, a few scattered papers and a glass of water. "I see you're reading," Caleb said, trying to start a conversation. "What's the book about?" Emily glanced at the book for a moment, then back at him. "It's a novel," she replied. "Nothing special." Caleb could tell that she wasn't eager to talk about it, so he decided not to push further. Instead, he looked at her wheelchair, noticing the way it was positioned by the window. "Would you like to go outside? Maybe get some fresh air? I can help you with that." Emily hesitated, her gaze flicking to the door. Caleb could sense that she hadn't been outside much recently, and perhaps she was feeling unsure about it. But after a few seconds, she nodded. "Fine," she said a little reluctantly. "I'll go outside. But you better not think I need help with every little thing." Caleb smiled, trying to keep the mood light. "I won't, I promise," he said. "Just here to help you however you want." With that, Caleb carefully wheeled her toward the door, guiding her through the house. Emily didn't say anything as they moved, her eyes focused ahead. Caleb noticed that she didn't seem to struggle with her chair, but the way she moved it suggested that she had learned to navigate her world carefully, taking each step slowly. It was clear that she had adapted to her circumstances, but that didn't mean she had embraced them fully. When they stepped outside, the bright sunlight hit Emily's face, and she squinted, shielding her eyes with her hand. The fresh air seemed to awaken something in her, and for the first time, Caleb saw a hint of relaxation in her posture. She took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. "Not bad," Emily said quietly. "It's nice out here." Caleb nodded, smiling. "It is. Sometimes it's good to just sit outside and enjoy the world. No need to rush through everything." They spent the next hour talking about small things. Caleb asked her about her favorite books, the places she wanted to visit, and the things she used to enjoy before her accident. She was still reserved, but Caleb could tell that she was starting to open up a little. Every now and then he noticed her smile, even if it was small. It was a sign that she wasn't as closed off as she seemed. By the time the sun began to set, Caleb knew that this week wasn't going to be easy. Emily was a woman full of pride, intelligence, and independence, and she wasn't going to let anyone change her life without a fight. But Caleb was ready for the challenge. He had promised to help her, and he wasn't going to back down. Emily, for her part, had begun to see Caleb in a new light. He wasn't like the others who had come to pity her or offer empty words of sympathy. There was something different about him, something genuine, and though she wasn't sure what the future held, she couldn't help but wonder if he might be able to show her a way forward. The days that followed Caleb's first visit to the sheriff's house were filled with small victories and quiet moments of progress. Caleb had not expected it to be easy, but he had also not expected Emily to push him away as much as she did. She was stubborn, fiercely independent, and at times he could see the walls she had built around herself. But Caleb wasn't one to give up easily. He knew that breaking through those walls would take time, patience, and a quiet strength that he was willing to give. Each morning, Caleb would arrive at the sheriff's house, prepared to help Emily with whatever she needed. Sometimes it was something small, adjusting the position of her wheelchair so that she could reach her books or helping her move from the bed to the chair. Other times it was something more challenging, teaching her how to manage her own daily tasks without relying on others. Caleb noticed that Emily never asked for help unless she truly needed it, and even then she would always try to do it on her own first. Caleb respected that about her. She had a strong will, and he could see the determination in her eyes every time she tried to overcome something. It was that same spirit that had made her so successful before her accident, and Caleb believed that if she could find a way to tap into that strength again, she could accomplish anything. One afternoon, as Caleb helped Emily adjust her position in her wheelchair, he noticed a book lying on the table in front of her. It was one of her favorites, an old leather-bound novel that she had told him about on their first day together. She had mentioned that it was a story about a woman who overcame great odds, finding strength in herself when everyone else had doubted her. Caleb could see the connection. Emily had always admired the protagonist of the book, a woman who refused to give up on her dreams despite the challenges she faced. It was clear that the story had inspired Emily in ways that no one else could understand. "Do you still read this one often?" Caleb asked, picking up the book and holding it in front of her. Emily looked at it for a moment before nodding slowly. "I used to," she said softly. "I don't know. Sometimes it just feels like the world is different now, like I don't belong in it anymore." Caleb frowned slightly. "I don't think the world has changed that much. Maybe the way you see it has, but you're still here. You still have a lot to give." Emily met his gaze, and for a moment there was a softness in her eyes that Caleb had never seen before. It was as if for the first time, she wasn't just trying to hide behind the wall she had built. "It's hard," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever go back to being the person I was. Everyone treats me like I'm broken, like I'm not the same anymore." Caleb placed the book back down gently and knelt beside her. He looked her in the eyes and spoke with sincerity. "You're not broken, Emily, you're just different. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being different. It doesn't mean you can't still do incredible things." She was silent for a long time, as if weighing his words carefully. Caleb knew it wasn't going to be easy for her to let go of the pain and frustration she had been carrying. But he was patient, and he was starting to understand the depth of her struggles. Even if she didn't speak about them all the time, she wasn't broken, she was just afraid. Afraid of being seen as weak. Afraid of the way people would look at her if she tried to do something beyond the expectations others had set for her. Over the next few days, Caleb and Emily continued their routine. Caleb would help her with tasks around the house, and they would talk about anything and everything. They would discuss books, the weather, the news in town, anything to pass the time. But there was something deeper happening between them, something unspoken. Caleb noticed that Emily's gaze softened when she looked at him, and though she never admitted it, she seemed to begin to rely on him more and more each day. One evening, after a long day of work, Caleb helped Emily move her chair onto the porch, where the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was still, and the sounds of crickets and birds filled the quiet evening. Caleb took a seat next to her, and for a few moments neither of them spoke. They simply sat there side by side, watching the world turn golden in the fading light. "Do you ever miss it?" Caleb asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The way things used to be? Before the accident?" Emily looked at the ground for a moment before answering. "Every day," she replied softly. "I miss running, I miss riding my horse, I miss feeling normal. I used to think I had everything figured out, but now I'm just here, stuck in this chair with no way to move forward." Caleb looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. "I don't think you're stuck. You're just figuring out how to move forward in a new way. It's not the same as before, but it doesn't mean you're any less than you were. You've just got to find your own path again." Emily looked at him, a mixture of skepticism and hope in her eyes. She was quiet for a long time before speaking again. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I do," Caleb said, his voice firm. "I believe in you, Emily. I don't know what the future holds, but I know you can handle whatever comes your way. You're stronger than you think." For the first time in a long while, Emily felt a flicker of hope. It was a small, fragile feeling, but it was there. Caleb wasn't treating her like someone who needed to be fixed or pitied. He was treating her like a person, an equal. And that, more than anything, was what she had needed. She hadn't realized it at first, but she was starting to trust him. Caleb wasn't just a man who had made a bet. He was someone who saw her for who she truly was. Not just the sheriff's daughter or a woman in a wheelchair, but someone with a mind, a heart, and dreams of her own. As the days went on, their connection grew stronger. Caleb continued to help her with small tasks, always finding ways to encourage her independence. He never pushed her too hard, but he always challenged her to do more than she thought she could. Emily began to surprise herself, picking up things she had dropped without asking for help, moving around the house more confidently, and even offering to help Caleb with small chores. It wasn't just the physical progress that Caleb saw. It was the change in Emily's spirit. She was starting to believe in herself again, to see beyond the wheelchair and the limitations she had placed on herself. Slowly but surely, she was finding her strength once more. And in the process, Caleb found something in Emily that he had never expected. A deep admiration for her resilience, her courage, and her ability to overcome the hardest of circumstances. Caleb knew that he had come to help Emily, but in many ways she had helped him just as much. She had shown him what true strength looked like, and he couldn't help but respect her more with each passing day. The days in Silver Creek had grown warmer as summer neared. Caleb's routine of helping Emily had become a part of his day, just as much a part of her routine now. They spent more time together, sometimes talking, sometimes simply sitting in silence, but always there was an unspoken understanding between them. Emily had started to rely on Caleb more, not just for physical help but for emotional support as well. She was beginning to see him not just as the rancher who had taken a bet, but as someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. Caleb, too, had begun to realize something he hadn't expected. He had grown fond of Emily, more than he had thought possible. It wasn't just the way she had opened up to him or the way her determination inspired him. It was the way she saw the world, even from her wheelchair. Despite everything she had been through, she never gave up. She never stopped trying to move forward, even when it seemed impossible. It was a strength Caleb admired, and in many ways, it made him want to be a better man. But their growing connection was soon to be tested in a way neither of them had expected. One afternoon, Caleb was working on his ranch when he received word from Sheriff Hayes. There had been a violent robbery in a nearby town, and the sheriff was needed to help track down the criminals. The sheriff had been recovering from his injury, but he wasn't fully healed and he needed someone to watch over Emily while he was away. Caleb didn't hesitate. He knew Emily would be upset at the idea of anyone watching over her, but he also knew that she would be left alone otherwise. When Caleb arrived at the sheriff's house to speak with Emily about the situation, he found her in the kitchen reading one of her books. She looked up when he entered, her expression immediately shifting to one of suspicion. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sharp. She could sense the tension in his tone and the worry in his eyes. "The sheriff's been called away," Caleb explained gently. "There's been a robbery and he needs to help track down the criminals. He wants me to stay here with you until he returns. I know you don't like the idea, but it's only for a few days." Emily didn't say anything right away. She set the book down on the table and wheeled herself closer to Caleb. Her face was tight, her brows furrowed in thought. Caleb could see the hesitation in her eyes. He knew she hated the idea of being coddled or watched over. "I don't need a babysitter, Caleb," Emily said firmly, her voice filled with frustration. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." Caleb nodded, not surprised by her reaction. "I know you are, but with the sheriff gone, I don't want you to be alone here. If anything happens—" "I don't need anyone to look after me," Emily interrupted, her voice shaking with emotion. "I'm not a child, Caleb. I don't need you to be here just because my father thinks I can't handle it." Caleb took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I'm not here because of what your father thinks. I'm here because I care about you, and I'm not leaving you alone. Not when there's a danger outside." There was a long silence between them, both of them staring at each other. Emily's face softened just slightly, but she still looked frustrated. She didn't want to admit it, but part of her was scared. The idea of being alone, of having to face everything on her own again, felt like too much. But she couldn't let Caleb see that. She didn't want to appear weak in front of him, especially not now after everything they had been through. "I'll stay," Emily said, finally breaking the silence, "but only because I don't want my father worrying about me." Caleb nodded, his heart lightened by her acceptance. He knew she wasn't happy about it, but he also knew that she had agreed because she trusted him, just as much as he trusted her. He could see the way she was trying to hold on to her independence, but he knew that deep down, Emily wasn't as strong as she always pretended to be. Over the next few days, Caleb kept his promise. He stayed with Emily, helping her with whatever she needed, whether it was something simple like moving her wheelchair or something more complicated, like helping her manage her father's affairs. Caleb could see how much she hated needing help, but he also noticed that little by little, she was starting to accept it. She didn't ask for it, but she allowed him to be there without pushing him away. The stress of the situation began to build as the days wore on. Emily tried to keep busy, reading, writing, or tending to the small tasks around the house. But her mind kept drifting to the things she couldn't change, the things she was afraid of. She didn't want to admit it, but she was scared. Caleb had never seen her like this before. Her usual tough exterior was starting to crack, and he didn't know how to help her. One evening, as the sun began to set and the shadows grew long, Caleb found Emily outside on the porch. She was staring at the sky, her eyes distant. She looked like she had something on her mind, something heavy. "Are you okay?" Caleb asked, stepping out onto the porch and sitting beside her. Emily didn't answer right away. She just stared ahead, her hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. Caleb could see the tension in her posture, the way she was holding herself back from saying something. He knew that she wasn't okay, but he didn't know how to reach her. "I'm scared, Caleb," Emily finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so long pretending to be strong, but I'm not. I'm terrified of being alone, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore." Caleb's heart softened as he listened to her words. He could hear the pain in her voice, the fear that had been hidden for so long. He reached over, placing a hand on her shoulder gently. "You're not alone, Emily, not now, not ever. You don't have to face this by yourself. I'm here for you. I always will be." Emily's eyes met his, and for the first time there was a glimmer of something more in her gaze. Trust. She didn't say anything, but the silence between them spoke volumes. Caleb knew that this moment, this admission of vulnerability, was a breakthrough for Emily. She was finally allowing herself to lean on someone else, to accept help when she needed it. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb felt like they were both moving forward together. The days passed quickly as Caleb stayed at the sheriff's house, watching over Emily while the sheriff was away. Though the situation had started with tension between them, with Emily's resistance to needing help, things had changed. They had both grown accustomed to one another's presence, each one beginning to understand the other in ways they hadn't before. Emily, once so determined to manage everything on her own, had allowed Caleb to become a part of her daily life. She didn't need to ask for help as often, but when she did, she no longer felt embarrassed or frustrated. She trusted him now, and it wasn't just because she had no other choice, it was because she knew, deep down, that Caleb cared for her, and that was a gift she hadn't expected. Caleb, for his part, had discovered that he wasn't just there out of a sense of duty or as part of a bet. He had come to care for Emily more than he had ever anticipated. She had become more than just the sheriff's daughter or a woman in a wheelchair. She had become a person of strength and resilience, someone who inspired him with every small victory, every time she pushed herself a little further. One afternoon, when Caleb was out in the barn working with the cattle, Emily wheeled herself outside to join him. She had been inside for most of the day, reading and reflecting, and though she didn't need to, she wanted to be near Caleb. She wasn't sure what had changed, but something inside her had shifted. She didn't feel as trapped anymore, as if her wheelchair had defined who she was. Caleb had helped her realize that it was just a part of her life, not her whole identity. She found him near the fence, checking on the cattle, his face serious but relaxed. He didn't notice her approach at first, so Emily took a deep breath and called out, her voice carrying through the open air. "Caleb." He turned around, a surprised smile spreading across his face when he saw her. "Emily, what are you doing out here?" She shrugged, not quite knowing how to explain the pull she felt to be around him, to share in the work he was doing. "I just wanted to be outside for a change. You've been keeping me inside too long," she teased lightly, though there was an edge of truth in her words. Caleb chuckled, walking over to her. "I'm sorry. You can go anywhere you want. You know that." Emily looked up at him, her expression more serious now. "I know, it's just, I didn't want to admit it, but you've made me realize something." "What's that?" She hesitated, searching for the right words. It wasn't easy for her to admit, but this time she wanted to say it. "I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to pretend that I'm not scared or that I don't need help. I don't want to be ashamed of who I am, even if it's not what I thought I'd be." Caleb was silent for a moment, and Emily worried she had said too much, opened herself up too far. But then he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to hide, Emily, not with me. And you don't need to be ashamed of anything. You're stronger than you think. I've seen it every day. You've been through so much and you're still standing, still moving forward." Her eyes softened at his words, and for the first time, Emily felt the weight of her fear lift, just a little. She had always thought that to be strong, she had to do it all herself. But Caleb had shown her a different kind of strength, the kind that didn't have to be done alone. She could be strong with someone by her side. She could lean on others, and that didn't make her weak. It made her human. "I've been so scared, Caleb," Emily admitted, her voice quiet. "Scared that if I let people help me, if I let them see the real me, they'd think I was weak. But I'm starting to realize that maybe I don't have to be perfect. Maybe I don't have to be what I used to be." Caleb placed a hand on the back of her chair, his eyes meeting hers. "You don't have to be perfect. None of us are. But you're already amazing. What you've been through, what you've fought through. It's something to be proud of." Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall, not because she was sad, but because she had been holding so much inside for so long. Caleb's words had unlocked something in her, and she wasn't ashamed anymore. She wasn't the same as before, but she wasn't broken either. She was still Emily, and that was enough. The next few days passed in a blur, filled with small tasks and moments of joy that Caleb had never expected to share with her. Caleb had grown more comfortable with the idea that he was a part of Emily's life now. He wasn't just there to help her. He was there because he wanted to be. And as he saw her confidence grow, as she took on more challenges, Caleb couldn't help but admire her more. One afternoon, the sheriff returned. His leg was still healing, but he had managed to catch the criminals responsible for the robbery. He was pleased to find everything in order at home, but when he saw Emily outside working on the garden with Caleb beside her, he couldn't help but notice the change in her. There was a new light in her eyes, a new strength in the way she held herself. "Looks like you two have been getting along well," the sheriff remarked with a smile, walking over to them. "I never thought I'd see the day when Emily Hayes would be working out here like this." Emily glanced at Caleb, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I've learned a lot, Dad," she said, her voice filled with more confidence than he had ever heard before. "And Caleb's helped me see that I'm capable of more than I thought." Sheriff Hayes nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I can see that. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Emily. I'm proud of you." And in that moment, for the first time, Emily didn't feel like she needed to prove anything to anyone. She wasn't trying to impress her father or Caleb. She wasn't trying to live up to anyone's expectations. She was simply living her life, moving forward at her own pace. As the days turned into weeks, Emily began to reclaim her independence. She didn't need Caleb's help as much, but he was always there when she asked. They continued to share their days, building a friendship that had blossomed into something more. Caleb had come to care for Emily deeply, and though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew that their connection had grown beyond that of mere helpers or caregivers. Emily had discovered a strength she didn't know she had, and Caleb had discovered a love he hadn't expected. Together they had faced challenges and overcome them, proving that true strength wasn't just about standing alone, it was about standing together. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt whole again. She had learned that her disability didn't define her, and with Caleb by her side, she knew that nothing could stand in her way.